Hello,
Hello?
Dr. Iqbal. Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah. So, yeah, thank you very much for the introduction. Okay. So, first of all, I'm very sorry I was traveling and somehow I managed to join the call. So, I don't have the slides with me. So, I'd request one of you from the host can just, scroll the slides and then I can just talk about, right? I think that should be, I mean, fine, I guess. So, yeah, I mean, first of all, thank you very much for organizing this session. I think this must be, a good informative session for someone who is thinking of applying for PhDs in abroad. And I mean, I personally believe that I should talk less, and you should ask me a lot of questions because I don't know what queries you have. So I think this is probably a good opportunity for us to answer your questions, or if you have some queries as well. So we should clarify that. But having said that, I mean the team, the hosting team asked me to make some slides. I'm not a big fan of making slides and then going through these old school slides. Uh, but it's good to talk, and I was just listening the previous two. I mean, you can still go to the previous slide, go to the previous slide. Yeah. So I just listening to the other speakers. I didn't get a chance to listen them fully, but again, I ask everyone, note your question down. You can ask after the session or at the end of this session. I also provide my email address. You can directly write to me, and of course, get in touch if you need some help or some more, let's say, information. So let's get started. But before I start, I should also tell you a few things. For example, someone who is thinking of doing PhD in abroad. So don't think that getting a PhD in abroad will always give you an edge in your career. Okay, so it's a personal choice. I'm not saying which one is good, which one is bad. So nowadays, it's not like we are in, let's say, 2024. So doing PhD, in the country or abroad, um, there are pros and cons. So many people think that I should go out and then do something, for some reasons. If you have some good reasons, of course, end of the day, what really matters is if you are doing a good piece of research. So if you do a good piece of research, even from India, people will read your paper. Okay. And if you don't do a good piece of research, no matter where you are, which country you belong to, or which country from where you're doing your PhD, nobody would read the paper, right? So this is what I personally believe. So the country, the institution give you a platform, and you should be grateful for that. And it's up to you to do the research, right? Because you will get a guidance from your supervisor, and end of the day, you have to, carry forward your work. You have to do a lot of progress with your PhD work, and even post PhD as well. It's not only limited to PhD. And end of the day, you have to write a thesis. So nobody is going to write the thesis for you. So there is a myth that you should do PhD in abroad. So don't be confused or don't get me wrong. Okay. So this is, I would say, something very fancy. But again, I'm saying that it's not good or bad. It's up to your personal choice. And wherever you do, irrespective of the places, your primary motivation would be to do quality research, which of course would advance the science, and the people would be interested in reading your papers. Okay, so now let's get started. So currently, okay. So my name is Rameez Iqbal, and I did my PhD. Okay, so I did my undergrad. So let me go back a bit in the past. So I did my undergrad from Alia University. Who knows? Maybe those who are from West Bengal or Kolkata, they know about this. So I was the first batch at Alia University in the Department of Mechanical Engineering. I did my undergrad in Mechanical Engineering, and then I was the first one to get cleared the GATE exams, and after that, I got admission in IIT Madras for my PhD. And during my PhD, I did basically a joint doctoral degree. So my PhD is from both IIT Madras and from Japan. So I got a chance to move to Japan twice during my PhD. And after that, I got a postdoc in ETH Zurich in Switzerland. And just recently, last year, I moved to the other part of Switzerland, which I'll talk about next. So you can see the map of Switzerland, and so Switzerland is a very unique country, in the middle of Europe. So it is basically, you can call it as a landlocked country, because other countries, if you see Italy, if you see Spain, they have some sea, like a Mediterranean Sea, something like that. Like even you have that in France, but Switzerland is kind of a landlocked country. So if you see the border, the eastern side of Switzerland, you have Austria, where the Vienna is the capital, and the western part of Switzerland, which is French, which is like France is the country. The If you go north, it's Germany, and if you go south, it's Italy. Right, so it's basically a landlocked country. So there is no sea, something like that. Then the next thing is, Switzerland is like every country you go. Like if you go to Spain, you have like your language is Spanish. If you go to France, it's a French. If you go to Germany, it's German, right? But Switzerland is a kind of a unique country where you speak three different languages. So some part of Switzerland who speaks German, but it's not the same German they speak in Germany, but it's called Swiss German. It's very similar to the normal German you speak in Germany or in Austria as well. The other part, which I currently live, it's called the French speaking part of Switzerland. So here people speak French, okay? So because it's very close to the French border, right? And then there is another part which is like close to the southeast, where you have a small portion which is close to Italy, and then that part of Switzerland they speak Italian. Okay, so one country they speak three different languages, and all the languages are, I would say, official. And any government document they publish, it comes in three languages, right? So that's all about Switzerland. And apart from, let's say, a country which is very famous for tourists, I mean, I put a picture which I took long back, but the country itself is great when it comes to doing research. So it's not only a country where people only come for tourism, come for honeymoon, or let's say the Swiss Alps, you can say. So go to the next slide. So here I want to tell you about why Switzerland, because again, I'm not like say that only this is the only country, because there are every country, in Europe or across Europe or outside Europe, everyone is doing well. Okay, so I mean, every country has their pros and cons. Okay, so I would only talk about where Switzerland is doing better. Okay, so the first thing is, of course, as I mentioned, that Switzerland is, of course, ranked one in when it comes to global innovation index. So there is an agency who does this ranking. Like when it comes to innovation means that, like for example, you do some research and what type of product you're bringing, or what type of thing you're bringing, and that they do the ranking. I think Switzerland is the number one, Sweden is second, and I didn't check the rest of the list. And the good thing is, why is that? Because what Switzerland follows is that they, of course, put a lot of money for research, but then they also promote that if you are doing research, like, take your research and carry forward this to, like bring a product out of it. Okay. So let's say if you are doing some research, okay, and at the end of your PhD thesis or at the end of your something, you think that your research is useful to start a company, or let's say to make a product. So then they would encourage you to do that, because if you do that, then you start a company, and then you can, of course, hire students from the same university where you studied. And that's how you are contributing to the economy. Because when you are doing a PhD, you're basically being paid by the taxpayers' money, right, for this country, from this country. But as soon as you start your company here, then you are hiring and you are also generating business, and you are also paying taxes, and eventually you are contributing back. So this is how the Switzerland is doing really well. So each universities, I mean, the top universities, not each university, I would say, they produce, let's say, 40 to 50 spin-offs. They call these spin-offs or startups every year. And some of the startups, which are like, I would say, uh like get like what is that called, uh I don't know, in startup they call this unicorn, yeah, something called unicorn, right? But yeah, so that's the first part. The second thing is, Switzerland has two universities which comes under top 100, sorry, top 50 QS ranking universities. ETH Zurich is, let's say, top 10. ETH Zurich is basically the number one university in Europe. Previously, it was Oxford and Cambridge, but as soon as UK went out of this, like what is that called, this Brexit, and now the entire Europe, I think ETH Zurich is the number one university. But if you see the global ranking, you have MIT, Harvard, Stanford. Of course, you have university in Oxford, Cambridge, which is good. I would say ETH is very nice. You also have, for example, is There is a university in China called Tsinghua University, which is excellent. There is one university in Singapore called National University of Singapore, which is excellent. And what else? I mean, yeah, I mean, these are all, I would say, fantastic universities. I would say like the top notch in global ranking. But having said that, don't get excited with the rankings, because the university's ranking is none of your business, because you have to do a piece of research. So that doesn't mean that if you go to a low ranking university and you won't be able to do good piece of research. This is wrong. End of the day, again, I say, if your research and you have to progress it. So like only the top universities are doing research and others are not. So this is a very wrong concept. Okay, but I just wanted to give you a perspective that how these universities are doing. So if everyone is doing well, that means it's a collective effort, and that's how they're doing well in those global rankings. Okay, now the other thing is, besides, there are other universities, which are also equally good. like like for example, if you think about India, like India has some universities which are central universities, right, paid by the central government. There are also universities which is called the state universities. Like that, in Switzerland, you have something called federal universities and something called the cantonal is basically different states they have, and it's basically paid by the states. Okay, but again, those states universities are really well. I can give you an example like University of Geneva, University of Zurich. They are like excellent. Like the economics department in University of Zurich, I heard it's like probably the best in Europe. So and apart from like ETH and EPFL, so doesn't matter whether it's a science or social science. I think their universities are really, really doing well because of, let's say, the support by the government. Of course, the quality of students they have, and of course at the end of the day, the ecosystem they have produced here, right? Now go to the next slide.
Yes.
Now here, I just wanted to show you a couple of pictures where I worked previously. So you see the picture at the bottom, which is like picture from the ETH Zurich, and then the picture, like the two pictures from the top, is like from EPFL. So these are two federal government universities in Switzerland. They are funded by the Swiss federal government, and they get enormous amount of funding for research and for teaching as well. But teaching is a bit difficult because, for example, here undergrad courses are taught in local languages. So if you go to ETH, some of the undergrad courses are taught in German. If you go to the EPFL, some of the undergrad courses are taught in French. So if you don't know the local languages, it's very difficult. But when you come for a PhD or a postdoc, English would be your official language, and you don't need to worry about that part, right? So go to the next slide. Now, here I want to show you some of those universities. So I said ETH and EPFL, these are two federal government, but apart from ETH and EPFL, there are a few other which are funded by the federal government, which is called IMPA, which is mostly famous for material science. There is something called AWOG. AWOG is mostly for the water research. They do a lot of research with water, uh, and there is something called PSI. PSI is very famous for synchrotron facilities, okay, X-ray and synchrotron facilities, and WSL is mostly for doing research on mountains. It's called like Swiss Alps. They do research on, mostly people on from geography, or they do something on forest also as well. So, and apart from that, you also have Uni Zurich. So these are like federal government, and then the rest is like from every canton they have, or every state they have, like Zurich, Bern, Lausanne, St. Gallen, Neuchâtel, Basel, Geneva. The other one is an Italian university which I cannot pronounce, and the next one is Freiburg. So go to the next slide, please. So now I think this is, I would say, very important for those who are thinking of applying. I think the application is like, I don't know about the other countries, and I have absolutely no idea how it works for the other countries, but I know how it works in Switzerland. So I think here most of the jobs are like, advertised in the university website. So you need to follow the website, like it can be website from, it's called like, jobs website. In every university has that. And it is, I would say, kind of a mandatory for every university to post all the job in their website, and then everyone will apply, and then from there they will pick it. So I would say it's a very fair process, and that's how it works. So if you want to apply, just follow the website, and then if you find something which is interesting and matching with your records or matching with your interest, feel free to apply for that. Okay, so what you need to do, as soon as you come across a profile, you just need to follow the link and then just go and apply for that. But let me tell you something, if you want to apply something, and let's say you are doing your masters, or like for the postdocs, I can tell, So if you're still doing PhDs and you think that you don't finish PhD yet, but you want to apply postdocs, please don't do that, because here it's kind of, I would say, mandatory to submit your PhD certificates. So you have to submit that. So when I applied, I first got my certificate and then I applied, because this is kind of, I would say, a norm for everyone, even for the PhDs also. You need to submit your transcripts from your masters. Okay. Now coming to the visa, as someone mentioned from the previous talk, that as soon as you are hired by the university, you get a piece of paper, which would be, let's say, prepared by the HR department of the university. Then they would send it to the government. The government does the rest of the thing, and then they would send it back to you via email. You take the printout, go to the Swiss embassy in New Delhi, and they would give you a visa in a week time, something like that, which is pretty fast. Unlike, let's say, other countries, for example, the United States, which is currently taking a lot of time to, like, for the visa processing. I don't know for the other countries, but I heard, at least for the Europe, it's probably much faster. Now, choice of discipline. Again, this is a very vague question. I don't believe in such things. Every country, really, I mean, I would say that every country has their strength, but end of the day, you have to do your own piece of research. So, but again, having said that, Switzerland has a very long history of doing really well for robotics. So, if you are a good in robotics, you can consider Switzerland is very good in pharmaceuticals. You can consider that, and also Switzerland is very, very, very good in doing micro nano engineering, because you know that there are a lot of Swiss watches which are very famous, which are like very expensive luxury watches, and they have been producing these for the last several hundred years. And I'm telling you that those are handmade watches, and that's why they're very expensive, and they are really, really good at it. Even before, let's say, this 21st century came, the technology was already there, and they are like probably one of the best in the world. So that is one thing I can tell you. Recently, the country is also trying to make some, let's say, mark in artificial intelligence. So the universities are pushing it. So if you want to contribute, or if you are very interested, you can of course consider applying. Having said that, the other departments and other disciplines are really welcome, because for all the departments, the government is funding, the government is pushing research forward. So don't worry about that. I just named only a few, but maybe I mentioned only four, but there are 400 other topics which are equally good, and you don't need to worry about that. So next slide, please. Yeah, I mean, living in Switzerland, I mean, Switzerland is a very small country. The country has a population of 8 million. Okay. So it's a very small country. You can think of 8 million is nothing, right? So accommodation is very competitive, and also very expensive as well, because it's a small country. So of course there is a huge demand. So finding an accommodation, you need to put a lot of efforts, but eventually you will get it. You need to apply, and then there will be a lot of, let's say, I would say, you need to apply, and then you need to qualify for that, and eventually you get it. But what really helps you, that every university has something called their housing website. If you follow that, you might get something. And even if you don't get something, the housing website or the housing department, or they have something like for the students to help, they do really help. And then there are also some hostels, but those hostels are mostly for the undergrad and for the masters, I believe, not for the PhDs and postdocs. So PhDs and postdocs, you have to take care of your own apartment. And when it comes to the next I mentioned is health insurance. So unlike other countries, I don't know about Spain, I don't know about Poland, I know about Germany and France, because those are neighboring countries. Here, the healthcare is private, so the government deducts some money from your salary, and your health care is taken care by the government. In Switzerland, it's kindly opposite. You have to pay your personal premium. Like, say, it's your premium you have to pay every month, and depending on how much money you're paying, this is like you can take, like, there is a range of, let's say, slabs you have. So it's very, I'm not able to explain it now because it's very complicated, but I can tell you that the healthcare quality is very, very, very good. And uh, and you have to take care of your own health insurance. It's not like a public, it's private insurance. Okay. Now coming to the public transport. So here, I would say that Switzerland is very next to Germany. So here everyone can afford a car. I mean, here per capita income is really good. So I mean, you can always see that there are a lot of luxury cars people can afford. But let me tell you that here the public transport is one of the best in the world. So you have, let's say, trains, you have trams, you have bus, and you also have something called the ferries or cruise. So you can take any of the modes of the transportation, and the transportation is, I would say, probably one of the best in the world. So even if you don't know how to drive, you are able to survive. So here, I would say car is not mandatory. But if you go US, let's say United States for PhD, car is not a luxury. It is kind of a necessity. Most of the times, if you have a family, if you have kids, you probably need a car. Okay, it's not a luxury. It's a necessity. Okay, now, but here it is not. Now coming to the language, as I said, that the country speaks three different languages: Swiss German, French, and Italian as well, but you can still survive with English. So there is absolutely no problem. The language is, it's a very personal thing. So if you know the language, you would be able to communicate with the locals, you would be able to make friends, I mean, and if you speak the language, people would also appreciate, because you are taking efforts to learn the language and also to communicate with them. So this is of course an effort. And if you, even if you speak even if you speak wrong language, or let's say something wrong, still I would say people would appreciate that you are at least showing some efforts. But again, this is, I would say, kind of an hobby, or something which is not a necessity or mandatory. Right, now go to the next one. No, I mean, many people ask that what type of fellowships do they apply. So I believe that here Switzerland was previously a part of EU, like Horizon 2020 programs. But I think last couple of years, or maybe last 3 years, Switzerland is not a part of that. So any European project, mostly for the, let's say, for the Marie Curie fellowships, for the postdoctoral fellowship, which is one of the most prestigious fellowships in the world, you are not eligible to apply for that. So that means any professor in Switzerland is not eligible to host you for that particular fellowship. Okay, now what you can do, because you don't, I mean, you're not eligible to host that, so they have something called SNSA postdoctoral fellowship, so which is equivalent to Marie Curie fellowship, which is paid by the Swiss government. And every year, around December, this is the deadline, so you should apply. So this year the cycle is over. If you are considering, you can think of applying next year. So what you need is, you need to contact the host professor, and you need to discuss that, okay, I want to apply for this. And if the host professor agrees to host you, then you both can together write a proposal and you should submit. If you get selected, then you would be hosted for 2 years, and it will be funded by the Swiss National Science Foundation, right? This is, I would say, one of the opportunities where you can take the lead and apply for some projects. Apart from that, there is an ETH, something called ETH postdoctoral fellowship. You can apply for that, but it is, I can tell you, it's a very, very, very competitive fellowship. It's very competitive. Okay, so, but again, I mean, you should always try that. And other than that, I would say Marie Curie is something which is currently you are not allowed to apply, but there are some talks which recently started. So maybe very soon Switzerland will again merge with the EU, but so far this is not the case. Okay, and this is like all political like decisions by the government. I'm not going to explain this why. And there are many undergrads and masters. If you're from IITs, I have seen many people come in summer for 2 months or 3 months. So these are the two internships I mentioned. So EPFL hosts 2 months internship for undergrads. So you can come here. It will be paid by the EPFL, and you can do some research in summer for 2 months, or let's say 2.5 months. And you have to apply again currently around December, I think end of November or December. And you would probably be notified by February or January, end of February, and you can come in summer, let's say around June or something. And there is something called Think Swiss. This is, you can of course look for that. If you need more information, you can always contact me. For that, I can of course provide you with more information. So next slide, please. Yeah, I think, thank you very much for your attention. And if you have some questions, you can of course feel free to ask me. And if you have some more personal questions, you can always write to me to that email address mentioned here, right? So I'm happy to take more questions. I think let's take the questions, and then I would be happy to answer your doubts and queries as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this impactful talk. The information you shared are invaluable and quite beneficial for our novice audience as well. As Dr. Iqbal said that he would like to have more questions, I hope our audience will have many questions for him as well.
I could see that there are many students who have posted some questions, but I'm actually online from my phone, so I'm not able to see the questions. So if someone can read the questions, and I can answer those
Yeah,
questions. But of course, the other two speakers also can join. And of course, I mean, if it is very related to me, I can answer. But if it is related to them, they should also take the initiative and answer those questions, right?
sure, sure, sure.
So please
So,
read those questions and then let us answer. Yeah.